of Indigenous people. It's built on the exploitation of like Chinese immigrants who came and built our railroads. It's built on the exploitation of black immigrants. It's built on exploitation and capitalism is inherently like exploited. It inherently exploits those who are like marginalized, like women and gay people and like people of color. And like I come from a very poor family, and like I'm half white and half black.
Yeah.
Like I get it. I come from a very poor family, and like my six children poor family. Like I went without dinners. I was very poor growing up, and it was because of the disenfranchisement of like black women, single black women, and like the fact that like capitalism doesn't provide like platforms for these people, and that I very much struggle to pull myself out of that position, and I haven't even really gotten there. I'm still poor. I'm still like a worker.
Have you traveled the world? This is honestly the best place in the world to live.
These people are all like very, very capitalist. They're very much people who believe in the free market. They're very much people who believe in like free speech, free market. They're all people who believe in like exploiting like third world countries because they like. I think that this state is built on genocide and built on exploitation, and that it needs to be dismantled and rebuilt.
I'm Bassi. I'm the founder and president of U Ottawa Students for Free Speech. My major is, I'm first year joint honors philosophy and political science. What they're accusing us online of being disgruntled right-wing Christian conservatives, which I found very interesting. They also accused me of being a white supremacist, which I found very interesting. Obviously, I'm not a white supremacist. Our group is actually, it shouldn't matter, but our group is pretty diverse, you know, ethnically, ideologically, gender. Well, the objective of the group is to keep opening the debate for people to speak. So long as there's people calling people, groups like us who just want to open the dialogue, these right-wing fascist Nazi groups, then our existence is justified, our mandate's justified. We're still going to have to provide a platform for people to speak and debate. And, you know, if you want people to come together and understand each other, you're going to have to give them a chance to talk. Our main challenge has been to student union. They don't like us very much. They're very ideological and against the sort of idea of free expression and having different people speak. And we have and we will in the future have to be bringing up motions and such to keep them from banning certain viewpoints. That was actually sort of our cause for forming, is that they were banning certain viewpoints, whether it's all the Jewish clubs, the pro-life club in the future, whatever other clubs that don't align with their mandate or their ideologies.
Hi, my name is Jilan, and I'm a member of U Ottawa Students for Free Speech.
I'm Trevor Stewart. I'm VP Franco Affairs for U Ottawa Students for Free Speech.
Well, we anticipated that there was going to be a protest because a few days ago the Ottawa Against Fascism group had made a long Facebook post about how we're bringing in a racist and misogynist speaker, and one of the members of the group came into the library a couple hours before the event was supposed to start and disguised himself as a regular goer to the library. And then I guess when the event was just about to start, he went and pulled the fire alarm. They seem like communal-anarchists.
So they're going to use this event to say that it's misogynistic, it's racist, it promotes white supremacy, it promotes this, promotes that, but really what they're trying to do is push out their message of capitalism is wrong and we want to keep going with communism.
Like these people are, I don't know, it's like the hammer sickle represents like socialism.
Preventing people from speaking only to push their own narrative, and that's pretty fascist on them.
No debate!
No platform for hate!
No debate! No platform for hate!
No platform for hate!
No platform for hate!
I like to call her Janice Fingo. She's a rape apologist. These people are all like very, very capitalist. Like free speech, free market. They're all people who believe in like exploiting like third world countries because they like, it's like these people are, I don't know, it's like the hammer sickle represents like socialism.
Janice Fingo's got to go. Hey, whoa. Janice Fingo's got to go.
If you really want to be convinced that speech needs to be protected, just take a look around you and see that people don't want it to happen, and we need to be out here making sure that people can talk.
The title of my talk is the university about the pursuit of truth or about the protection of approved ideas? I'm Janice Fingo of the University of Ottawa. Most respected academics today, if asked that question, would say that of course the university is about the pursuit of truth and that there are no approved ideas. This is a paranoid right-wing fantasy. But if pressed on the matter of free speech, they would say that the university is a community based on the values of inclusion and diversity, and that one must balance freedom of expression with maintaining an environment where students can learn without discrimination and harassment, which sounds okay, unimpeachable. But what it means is that considerations other than truth are now paramount at the university, and I would argue in society at large as well. Here, for example, is President and Vice Chancellor Deborah McClatchy apologizing to Wilfrid Laurier TA Lindsay Shepherd for the way Shepherd was treated last fall. She was interrogated, she was accused of promoting transphobia for showing a short clip in her class of a public television debate involving Jordan Peterson. This is what McClatchy said, quote, "Let me be clear by stating that Laurier is committed to the abiding principles of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, giving life to these principles while respecting fundamentally important human rights and our institutional values of diversity and inclusion is not a simple matter," end quote. It isn't? This is a fancy way of saying that the university isn't about freedom of speech anymore, because if other values such as diversity and inclusion, if those are equally or more important, then speech will inevitably be restrained. It will inevitably depend on the feelings of potentially offended persons, and it's hard to imagine any serious subject not being likely to wound and threaten somebody in today's very victim-conscious climate. The President McClatchys of the world know this all too well, and to be fair, know that the human rights tribunals and such are watching them. So freedom of speech is dead on many university campuses, and a majority of professors are okay with that. In some cases, in fact, professors make very complicated arguments about what freedom of expression means, trying to claim that the principles of freedom of speech were never meant to apply to certain types of expression. In March of 2017, for example, in advance of a talk by Jordan Peterson at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, a group called the President's Advisory Committee on Building an Inclusive Community. This is a very large SJW group that advises the president. That group issued an extraordinary statement in which they argued that Professor Peterson's speech shouldn't fall under the category of protected speech at all, even though they didn't even know yet what he was going to say. This is what they claimed, quote, "Freedom of speech doesn't now and hasn't ever meant that we can or should be able to say whatever we like in public spaces, regardless of the impact of our speech on others." Remember, this is a professor of psychology speaking. And go on. Instead, the concept of freedom of speech has most often been mobilized to protect specifically counter-hegemonic ideas, ideas that actually challenge rather than reiterate the status quo, end quote. This bizarre bafflegab is a now fairly standard position taken by those who believe, those elites, that only speech that passes their political purity test deserves a hearing. If your discourse can be said to, quote, "reiterate the status quo," whatever that means, it doesn't deserve protection from goons and hooligans, and of course from people like the heretic hunters on the President's Advisory Committee at McMaster U. That's what gets taught as elite opinion at universities today in classroom after classroom. And it's no wonder that their students use illegal tactics, intimidation, and violence to shut down talks by speakers they've been coached to hate. There's actually been a fair bit of argument online lately about whether the threat to freedom of speech on campus is a real issue or not, and if it is real, whether it comes equally from the left or the right. So I would encourage everyone to judge for yourself. Take a look at the database compiled by the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, or FIRE for short. FIRE has created what it calls a disinvitation database, which is a listing by year since 2000 of the censoring of hot-button topics and speakers on university campuses. So look carefully at that list and see who's doing the shutting down and what kind of strategies they typically use. Out of 35 incidents recorded by FIRE for the year 2017, 30 of the censorship efforts came from the left, about 86% or so. The database includes many well-known names: Milo Yiannopoulos, Ben Shapiro, Gavin McInnes, Betsy DeVos, Donald Trump Jr., Tommy Robinson, Dennis Prager. Many of these people are not academics, so of course that's no reason why their ideas shouldn't be discussed on a college campus. Others, though, are highly respected scholars and researchers, authorities in their fields, like political scientist Charles Murray, author of The Bell Curve, and Heather McDonald, fellow of the Manhattan Institute and author of The War on Cops. It would be an enormous privilege to be able to hear such people speak, but they too have been violently disrupted. In March of 2017, students at the elite Middlebury College in Vermont disrupted an event featuring Charles Murray, forcing the talk to be moved to a private location where only Murray and the professor who had invited him, a political scientist named Allison Stanger, where only those two would be able to discuss his ideas by remote feed. But protesters became aware of the new location and attacked Murray and Stanger, surrounding their car, pounding on it, rocking it, throwing a stop sign at the windshield, and grabbing the hair and twisting the neck of Professor Stanger, who ended up in hospital as a result. It was a surreal encounter, all because a world authority on IQ was prepared to share his knowledge and entertain questions from his audience. In April of 2017 at Claremont McKenna College in California, Heather McDonald faced an angry mob of Black Lives Matter protesters who harassed students and faculty attempting to attend the event and blocked the entranceways to the building where the talk was to take place, while the police stood by, mainly watching, as they so often do at such events. And as had happened with Charles Murray, McDonald was taken to a different venue so that she could give her talk to essentially an empty room via live stream, but protesters still pounded on the windows and yelled obscenities, and the talk had to be cut short at the instructions of the police. McDonald is a diminutive, impassioned, incredibly smart and well-informed thinker whose arguments about the threat to Black communities posed by Black Lives Matter are of enormous importance to our society, yet they provoke hysteria. In my own country, there have been shutdowns and disruptions aplenty of everyone from journalist Christy Blatchford and bioethicist Margaret Somerville to men's advocate Warren Farrell and conservative pundit Ann Coulter. Most recently, Queen's University protesters disrupted a talk by Professor Jordan Peterson, and Wilfrid Laurier protesters were successful in preventing a talk by journalist Faith Goldie. Skeptics will point out, they have pointed out, that a few handfuls of canceled speaking events isn't that many in a large country like the United States with some 4,700 colleges and universities. And this is true to a certain extent, though the database makes no claim to being comprehensive, and there are likely more canceled events that we never hear about. And of course, these events are just the tip of an iceberg that includes manifold types of censorship, from the indoctrination of undergraduates and the training up of graduate students all the way up to the hiring of professors, the granting of tenure, the funding of professors' projects, and the penalizing of dissent at all levels. We know that for every Heather McDonald who is shut down, there are hundreds of speakers who are never even considered at all, whose ideas are dismissed as right-wing, fringe ideas, and are never discussed at the university to begin with. But what is really noteworthy about the recorded events on FIRE's database is not only the level of violence and disruption employed, but also the shocking manner in which university administrators often go out of their way to condone the protesters, or at least to make outlandish excuses for them. In nearly every one of these cases on FIRE's database, the university either makes no statement at all after the protest, or it makes a statement in which it expresses regret for the lack of civility in general, but suggests that this lack of civility applies equally to the speaker as it does to those who resort to illegal disruption, intimidation, and violence. And here's a case in point. Professor Allison Stanger, the political scientist who went to the hospital after she was beaten by a mob for inviting Charles Murray, she wrote an opinion piece in the New York Times last March 2017 entitled, "Understanding the Angry Mob at Middlebury That Gave Me a Concussion." Now you would think that she would primarily talk about why the mere act of giving a talk, and not just anybody giving a talk, but a distinguished political scientist, why that mere act would provoke a riot. And we're not talking about the owner of a factory telling his workers that they're going to lose their jobs. This is an academic making rational, evidence-based arguments with which one is free to disagree or ignore altogether. So what does it say about a group of privileged young people, one of the most privileged generations in world history, that their first recourse is to violence? But that's not what Allison Stanger was really interested in addressing. Stanger wanted to show off her progressivist credentials. She actually blamed Donald Trump and Trump supporters for the students' actions, saying that Trump had polarized America with his violent rhetoric. This is what she said, quote, "President Trump has demonized Muslims as terrorists and dehumanized many groups of marginalized people." Well, that is true radical style. Never miss an opportunity to say that the violent mobsters are really good people. She went on, quote, "Much of the free speech that's Trump, has inspired or has refused to disavow is ugly and has already had ugly real-world consequences," end quote. So that is astounding. A political science professor refusing to make a basic distinction between speech and violence. And this is what the opponents of free speech always do. Talk about violent rhetoric. And that means that you can be violent. You can use violence against somebody and say that you're simply responding to that speaker's discursive violence in a kind of almost self-defense. Near the end of her article, Professor Stanger said, quote, "I hear and understand the righteous anger of many of those who shouted us down. I know that many students felt they were standing up to protect marginalized people who have been demeaned or even threatened under the guise of free speech," end quote. Thanks, Professor Stanger. You just guaranteed that university students will be emboldened to continue their campaign to give other people concussions and send other people to the hospital, and maybe those others won't blame them for it either. And this sympathizing with the bullies, appeasing them and attacking the speakers who were themselves attacked, this is seen fairly often in such cases. After Milo Yiannopoulos was prevented from speaking at DePaul University by Black Lives Matter protesters, the president of the university made a notable public statement in which he essentially blamed Yiannopoulos for the whole scandal. He made clear his extreme dislike of Yiannopoulos, saying of speakers like him that, quote, "Their shtick is to shock and incite a strong emotional response they can then use to discredit the moral high ground claimed by their opponents. This is unworthy of university discourse, but not unfamiliar across American higher education. There will always be speakers who exploit the differences within our human community to their own benefit, blissfully unconcerned with the damage they leave behind," end quote. What a fascinating spectacle to see a university president verbally attacking an invited speaker for, quote, discrediting the moral high ground, end quote, of Black Lives Matter, as if Milo or anybody else owes it to Black Lives Matter to help them maintain their facade of moral legitimacy. In cases such as these, one catches a glimpse into the disordered mental and moral universe of academic leaders in which it is clear that their primary aim is to make common cause with thugs whom they imagine to be victims. Some of these people, of course, are quite sincere. Others are careerists. Still others, unhinged ideologues. But one thing is clear. When you hate what you perceive to be social injustice more than you love the principles of civil dialogue, you shouldn't be at university at all. And unfortunately, these are the ones firmly in charge at the present time. So I expect we will see many more violent disruptions in future. What a shame.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please support us on Patreon. If even half of our subscribers gave us $1 per month, we'd be well on our way to creating more and better content. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Studio Brule.